Not that long ago, TJ Dillashaw was considered to be one of the greatest UFC fighters of all time. He was super technical, well-rounded, and had this unrelenting will to win that only few possessed.
I don't care if we're playing Monopoly, if we're fighting, whatever it may be, you be me, I'm pissed, you know? I do not like to lose.
But that win at all cost mentality ultimately destroyed a potential Hall of Fame career. TJ would go on to tarnish his legacy by testing positive for PEDs, enter fights with debilitating injuries, and has even ruined his livelihood post-fighting.
Do you feel like it tarnished your legacy a lot?
I definitely did.
His mindset that made him so successful was in the end a curse, and this is the story. When TJ Dillashaw burst onto the scene via The Ultimate Fighter back in 2011, it was clear just how talented he was. He had wrestled NCAA Division I, joined Uriah Faber's Team Alpha Male Gym, and took to MMA in an instant. And while he didn't win the show, he'd go on to accomplish something more significant just 2 years later when he beat Renan Barão to win the UFC Bantamweight title.
I've seen way more than 1,000 fights. I don't know how many I've ever seen professionally. The best fight I ever saw in my life, the finest performance, was this man sitting across the table from me. TJ Dillashaw, your fight with Renan Barão was the slickest, most technical, most beautiful mountain that I've ever seen anybody climb.
At the time, Renan Barão was a pound-for-pound great and undefeated in his last 32 fights, which is the third longest streak not just in the UFC, but MMA, period. Dillashaw went in as a huge underdog, yet he dominated Barão for 5 rounds and then finished him in style.
Did you ever have a doubt? There were so many people doubting you.
You got to ignore it. You know, I mean, obviously you hear it, you hear how awesome the guy is, but you know, it's just the mental mindset you for competition. I mean, you can't go into a competition scared. If you are, you're not going to be to your fullest. So I went in there with 100% belief, even though I knew how great the champion was. I just had to believe in myself.
Despite everyone doubting him, TJ rose to the occasion under the bright lights. In those situations, even other UFC fighters second-guessed themselves.
There's been some times when I've left the locker room and known I was a lamb. Yeah, going to slaughter. Yeah.
Can you name who?
I did not think I was gonna beat John Jones the night that I fought John.
It just goes to show that with TJ, we're dealing with a different level of self-confidence, even amongst uber-confident fighters.
I mean, I push myself harder than anybody I've ever met. No one's gonna outwork me. I'm obsessed about being the best, and I love doing it. I love putting those 6-hour days in. You know, I like going to my strength conditioning coach and him just fucking obliterating me.
But as the self-proclaimed hardest worker in the room, TJ Dillashaw wasn't an easy person to train with.
TJ was never the best teammate. He would like try to hurt people. He's a very competitive guy and he has a temper and like...
Try to hurt people how?
Cheap shot.
Cheap shotting.
Shot, yeah.
We always used to
end the bell, boxing, he knee ya.
He knee ya. I'd be like, no knees. He's like, I just need him to the body. I'm like, yeah, we're boxing sparring.
He knees you to the body in boxing sparring?
There's no secret about TJ's. Yeah. I mean, we talked about it when he was still on the team also, that he had to be like reeled in a little bit, right? He's just got a temper.
And one day on the mats of Team Alpha Male, that temper exposed his dark side after he destroyed the career of an undefeated teammate.
That's why Chris is out. You know what I mean? Need him in the back of the head.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I mean,
Chris Holdsworth. That's where the injury came from?
I don't want to. Chris doesn't want us really talking about that.
Well, but that's the truth. Happened? We're talking about cheap shot, and that's
what was it again?
I mean, he doesn't care if we talk about it. I mean, I guess
it's the truth. It's
what happened? How did it go?
I'm not saying it. I don't know. It's TJ's.
It was him and TJ going. I remember distinctively, Dwayne used to come up to Chris and be like, "Hey, like, Grasshopper." He's like, "We have, TJ's fight, and
can you take it easy on him?
Can you take it easy on him?" Chris is a killer. Chris is fucking him up. Everybody. I mean, Chris was an animal, and I guess Chris choked him out, and TJ got out and fucking hit him in the back of the head.
When he's down on the mat.
When he was down on the mat.
While that was just a taster of what's to come, the Chris Holdsworth situation was the initial wedge between TJ Dillashaw and his team. And that wedge ended up in a full-blown split that defined a huge part of TJ's legacy.
There's a little snake in the grass right there.
What's up,
hey, little boy.
How's it going?
Are you lost?
Definitely lost.
Where's your mommy, little boy?
Usually in MMA, fighters are extremely loyal to their coaches and teammates, unless there is a real lack of resources or training partners, people will tend to stick with the team that brought them up. In TJ's case, that was Uriah Faber and Sacramento's team Alpha Male.
I was a coach at UC Davis from 2003 to 2005, and TJ was one of the guys I recruited. As on the phone, I talked to him when he was a high school senior, and he actually was already set to go to a different school. I tried to talk him into getting his grades up so he could get into UC Davis throughout that semester, and I've always had my eye on him since then. That was 2003, 2004.
Wow.
So, I've got a long history with the guy.
Uriah had shown Dillashaw the ropes when he was entirely new to MMA. But after many years at Alpha Male, another MMA coach, Dwayne Ludwig, was temporarily teaching at the gym, and he and TJ formed a strong bond.
We had like four or five times where people tried fighting for a title and did not win. We always came up short. Uriah against Cruz, against Barao, and Benavidez twice against Cruz, like always coming up short. So we finally we need a coach. We brought in Dwayne, turned a bunch of wrestlers into strikers. It was amazing. Still to this day, I've never had a better training room than those 2.5 years that Dwayne was with Alpha Male.
So when Dwayne Ludwig left California to set up his own gym in Colorado, TJ had a choice. But regardless of whatever loyalties he had to Faber, Dillashaw believed he'd become a stronger fighter with Dwayne Ludwig, so off he went. For him, the decision was as simple as that.
I knew Cruz was a massive fight, going to cement my legacy. So I sat Uriah down at lunch. I remember telling him, hey, I'm going to do my full camp in Colorado. I can't be doing, I was flying back and forth.
That's crazy.
And then when I'm in Sacramento, I'm the coach. I'm fighting for a world title. I can't be coaching guys.
Yeah.
And so I told him this, and he pretty much was like, you're either with us or with him, So he kicked me out of the gym. Not just saying okay, go do your camp there. You can't come back. I just bought a house in Sacramento. My life is in Sacramento. My best friends were in Sacramento. Alpha Male guys were my best friends at the time, and just kicked me out the gym saying all right, man, you chose Dwayne. You chose Dwayne over us, which he held Alpha Male like a family, right? I can understand that, but it's at the same time, I'm the one stepping in the cage and I'm the one fighting for a world title, you guys aren't doing, I need to think about myself, and there's no coach here. I got to go to where the guy that made me great.
And although he dropped the title in an extremely close split decision to Dominic Cruz shortly after, the tension with Team Alpha Male eventually came to a head via his former training partner, Cody Garbrandt.
I never liked the guy. And, that was because I thought it was just his competitive nature. But as time went on, I got to know TJ as a person. It wasn't the case. It was just that he's a dickhead.
Once upon a time, both TJ and Cody were borderline friends. They trained together, TJ coached Cody when he was newer in MMA, and they sparred numerous times together. But in the end, TJ would win that rivalry emphatically, knocking Garbrandt out in back-to-back fights to cement himself as one of the best fighters of his era. For him, loyalty didn't enter the equation. Dillashaw's only goal was to be the best, no matter the cost, and so-called backstabbing his former friends wasn't an issue for him. But as champion once again, TJ Dillashaw wanted to go one further, so he set his eyes on a second UFC title. As a normal-sized, perhaps even a small bantamweight, moving up to face the then featherweight champion Max Holloway would have been a size mismatch, so Dillashaw intended on going down a division. In front of him was Henry Cejudo, the new king at Flyweight, who had just knocked off the longtime champion Demetrius Johnson. If TJ was successful, it would etch his name in the history books forever. But he had a fight before the fight, making the weight. TJ left no stone unturned. He and his conditioning coach, Sam Calvita, used algorithms to calculate every calorie consumed, every calorie burned, and everything in between.
Sam would tell me what to go to bed at. He knew what I was going to wake up at. He tells me the water loading I'm doing, the amount of electrolytes I'm taking in, the amount of food I'm eating, and so he knows exactly what my body's going to wake up and do. He's been tracking it for not 2 years now.
That was the sacrifice Dillashaw was willing to make for greatness. And despite looking like a shell of his former self, he somehow made 125 pounds, but at a cost.
My delusional optimism is I got in trouble because of this fight camp because I went full-blown anemic, so...
Oh, shit.
Yeah, I mean, when you lose so much body fat, I had no body fat on me anymore, and you're only eating 1,500 calories, and you're burning fucking 3,000 to 5,000 calories, your body's gonna shut down, and it's gonna tell you you're dying.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's what I was doing. So I went full-blown anemic, my hematocrit's in the 30s, mid-30s, and maybe even lower than that. And I like wake up in the morning cold, like freezing cold.
Man.
I have no energy. Like,
there's no fat on you to keep you
I'm
warm.
supposed to get up and fight for a world title fight, and I just felt like garbage.
But the real fight was a disaster. Dillashaw was finished in just 30 seconds.
Fuck! Fuck! Motherfucker! Fuck!
And for all his backstage anger, he couldn't accept the loss and was adamant that the fight was stopped prematurely.
Tonight was very unfortunate, but you don't stop a title fight like that. You don't rob 12 weeks of my work, you know? Congratulations to the guy. I got respect for him. I'm happy for him for winning, but look, that's it's not the way it goes down, man. I've worked 12 weeks to push for this and for my legacy, and for me to hardly get clipped behind my ear. I'm in on a single leg scrambling, and for you to stop a scramble for not only a world title fight but a champ versus champ fight, it's uncalled for, man.
But 2 months later, news would break that was far more damaging than the defeat itself.
TJ Dillashaw, of course, your former UFC bantamweight champion, has accepted a 2-year sanction from USADA after testing positive for a prohibited substance. Dillashaw, 33, tested positive for recombinant human erythropoietin. I think that's how you pronounce it, or EPO.
While losing all that weight, TJ Dillashaw became anemic. He was down to 4% body fat, burning far more calories than he was consuming, and waking up in the middle of the night shivering. As a result, he took EPO to keep his energy levels up during training. The same performance-enhancing drug that Lance Armstrong famously used, which massively boosts cardio.
Apparently that stuff has a giant advantage. It gives you an anabolic advantage. It also gives you crazy recuperative powers. So like you could train really hard and then be ready to go the next day.
TJ was handed a 2-year suspension by USADA, stripped of his UFC bantamweight title, and will forever be labeled a drug cheat. His quest for greatness and willingness to do whatever it took to earn it ended up tarnishing his career forever. And it was all because his self-confidence told him he could do it.
It's the worst mistake of my life, to be honest. And it's delusional optimism. You know, the same thing that got me to the top, the same thing that made me champion the way that I think.
In a sport that has quite a rich history of performance-enhancing drugs being used, it's very rare to see a UFC fighter test positive nowadays. And it feels like 9 times out of 10 when someone does pop, it's proven to be a tainted supplement, and they end up with a slap on the wrist. But for TJ, there's no hiding EPO. It's an injectable and a very strong PED, so he had no choice but to own his terrible mistake.
I messed up. I'm having a hard time trying to forgive myself for this, which I should have a hard time. I should have a hard time forgiving myself. I understand criticism and scrutiny coming my way, but what I really feel bad about is any kind of bad light I'm bringing on my coaches, my family, my teammates. They had no involvement in this, and I feel the worst for them.
But the true cost of this was his mental health.
I have a ton to think about that should make me very depressed on my situation. Becoming, being a world champion, still think that I should be at the top, not being able to compete, taken out of my sport, made some serious mistakes throughout my career, things that really should fucking bother me, but I just distract myself.
And while his career may have seemed over at that point, 2 years moves fast in the MMA world. He may have lost what was likely some of the greatest years of his career, but the time came and went, and in the blink of an eye, it felt like Dillashaw was back trying to recapture his title. But yet again, it ended awfully, perhaps even more so this time. TJ scraped a controversial decision win in his return fight against Corey Sandhagen, but it came with a cost.
And it didn't get me from the leg lock because when we got into a scramble and he tried getting back to his feet and I tried staying on top, so I leaned my chest over my body. At the same time, my LCL just went pow, and it was loud, dude. It was like, I'm super surprised he didn't hear it or feel it, because I know I even heard it when it happened. So I knew that I was as soon as the round was over, I limped back to my corner. I sat down. I was like, dude, my knee's fucked.
He required surgery on his torn ligaments, which meant even more time on the sidelines. But when healthy, a title shot awaited him. He was facing Aljamain Sterling, and on paper, it was a decent stylistic matchup for TJ. He'd supposedly have a huge advantage in the striking department, and hopefully had the wrestling credentials to stop Aljo's takedown attempts. As a result, many believed Dillashaw would win the bantamweight title for the 3rd time. But just 30 seconds into the fight, TJ dislocated his shoulder, and you could see he desperately wanted to tap out there and then. His mentality just wouldn't let him though. In the end, there was nothing he could do as he was ground and pounded out. But the story doesn't end there. In the post-fight interviews, TJ revealed he had that shoulder injury going into the fight and knew his shoulder could pop out like it did.
It wasn't like super surprised that it happened. I'm just pissed that it happened so fast and that it didn't go back in like I was hoping it would, It's sore now. I'm scheduled to get surgery next Tuesday.
It turns out that while coaching the Ultimate Fighter 5 years prior in 2017, TJ injured his shoulder on the Coach's Challenge against Cody Garbrandt.
I blew my shoulder out when I was coaching Ultimate Fighter doing the Coach's Challenge, playing tetherball on a balance beam above a pool.
No way.
I blew my left shoulder out.
Really?
Yeah, I fell off. I would catch myself on the balance beam to get back up as fast as I could to keep playing, and I dislocated my shoulder. It popped back in. It was like a sublux.
Ugh.
But in doing so, I tore my supraspinatus, which is a rotator cuff muscle. I got that fixed. It was a little bit of a labrum fix too back in 19. I don't know if it just didn't take or when I injured it again, but right now I have a full thickness tear in my supraspinatus. I have a full thickness tear in my infraspinatus. I have a tear in my teres minor. I have an anterior labral tear, and the head of my humeral head is dented from dislocating it.
Of course, his mental resistance even in a game of tetherball pulled him to victory, but the damage was done. And while serving his 2-year suspension, TJ tried to get the shoulder fixed, but it never truly healed. But despite going into the fight knowing he was severely compromised, Dillashaw still believed he could beat Aljamain Sterling with essentially one arm.
That last Sterling fight, like you said, I decided just to take it because 36 years old, Sterling striking sucked balls. I figured I could beat him with one arm. His shoulder just got worse and worse and worse.
Even 2 years on from that championship fight, TJ Dillashaw's shoulder is still destroyed, and it ultimately forced him to retire.
Unfortunately, it's fucked. I can't even. I can't do this.
Really? Holy shit!
And it doesn't hurt. It just doesn't work.
Just
so
stuck.
I didn't want to retire. It's like been kind of like a real bitter thing. It's been hard for me to actually be around the sport recently. Like even helping my training partner Juan Archuleta. He's fighting in Japan and risen for the belt. Big fight coming up. It's been hard for me to wrap my head around being around the sport at the same time being forced out of it, and also my career just kind of panning out the way it did towards the end. Like really just bitter.
Yet he still believes that if he was healthy, he's the best bantamweight around. Call it stupid, call it delusional, but that's the ego and confidence that Dillashaw has in himself. Once upon a time, it helped make him become the 2-time bantamweight champion of the world and a pound-for-pound great. But as time went on, it became the curse that led him to performance-enhancing drugs and fighting while severely injured in order to chase the success he once had. And that will to win ended up tarnishing his career forever. If you enjoyed this video, please go and hit the subscribe button. We're looking to expand the channel going into 2025, and every time someone hits the sub button, it helps us get one step closer to that goal. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.